Hello, everybody. I kind of felt like there was a little bit of misunderstanding with what the final project is going to be. Um, Django is for making the back end on websites, uh, and a lot of people from what I've heard, seem to be running with the website thing. And we don't need to make a whole website. So, like some of the ideas I was hearing was people talking about a business and a website that promotes a business, but there was no application in it. All we need is a web application. So really, we're only using the HTML for our GUI, our graphical user interface, or GUI. Some people like the letters. So I'm making thought I'd make a short video because all we need is a web app. So I thought I'd make a small web app. Here's the list. You can see there's not much on it. I like to throw errors in classroom examples because usually we see textbooks and tutorials where everything seems to be working great, and I think it's very important to see how to read the errors. So half the things I put in our short to-do list here are make the errors. So just a web app, so like one page. It doesn't even have to be super fancy. All we're really using the HTML for is to create a form, HTML form, and then we'll use that form as the front end interface for our application. Hopefully that makes more sense. Just a short video, much shorter than those long ones the other day, which seemed to be about as short as I could get the Django set up. But yeah, this is more like the second one, only it'll go quicker now that we've seen that. So here's what we did in the second video: set up our little page with the example, and we had these templates. So we need a couple more templates for our form here. So that's first thing, make the tip calculator and tip results page. So one with the form, and then the action on that form will just go to this other page, is the basic idea. So I'll create a new file. I'll go ahead and save it so that Adam knows I'm working in HTML. I'll call this one tipcalc.html and use the predictive text to write that really quick. And one more file, new file. Again, let the text editor know. This is Adam. The Adam text editor was created as a group project, a public group community project on GitHub. So lots and lots of programmers had input into what would make a nice text editor. It's free, open source, coded in JavaScript. That's one of my favorites to use anymore. So call this one tipresults.html. That way the lexing, based off the lexicon of the language, the lexing knows that we want HTML. So you can use the predictive text to get all of that much. This is the results, so maybe I'll start here. So for results, we should be getting a tip from our application, so I'll set up a spot for that. So like if we get a Python dictionary in called tip, we'll put some code in, else we'll set a little default, and then end if. This is another thing that's always missing in the textbooks looking at the finished example is I find it a lot more productive to bounce around, and the code needs to be in a certain order in the end, but I don't think about it in that order. So if there is a tip there, then we'll say you should leave the server whatever that tip amount is today. And in that header element, and if that doesn't work for some reason, then I'll put a paragraph in, just something went wrong. Please use the back button and try again. So that'll work. Once we calculate what the tip is, we'll send it to this page, and our template will throw that number up there in a sentence. So that's kind of the HTML part. Or half the HTML part. That's the results. For the other part, we need a form to show some buttons on. And we'll have an action that'll do some stuff, and a method of how we do that stuff. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Get the HTML together first. Let's see, what do we need? Maybe an input for how much a meal cost. Just a simple tip calculator, right? A meal costs $25, leave 15%. How much is that going to be? So we'll need a meal price, and that's just going to be a simple input. If you don't know HTML, don't worry, we can do some quick coverage on it later. But a lot of people in this class have had the SDEV 153 class, so you're probably familiar with HTML and maybe some CSS to make it look a little nicer. But if not, well, we can cover that quickly later. So our input needs to be a number because it's a price. Type equals number, minimum equals 0.00, step equals 0.01. Make sure we're showing money amounts. And the critical one here, when we send stuff to the server, it comes in from the name attribute. So make sure your inputs get a name attribute. Our rule of thumb is the class, using a class to identify a particular HTML element is, for this style sheet, using the ID to identify a particular element is typically on the servers, or typically for the client side, so the JavaScript, and using the name attribute to identify a particular element is what the server needs. So for your Django stuff, make sure you use the name attribute, and we'll call this one price. Is that a good name for it? In that paragraph, create another paragraph that so ask how the service is. Let's see, one end is bad, and then put type equals range. That's the little sliders. Let's say minimum is 5% for a tip. That sounds like a good minimum. And maximum of 30%. That sounds good for this example. So the little slider thing we grab and slide back and forth depending on how happy we are with our service. And once again, to send it to the server for Django to work with, we need to use the name attribute for it to identify. I'll call this service. And remember that when we're coding, it's really useful to use the same words over and over again, and they only look the same to us. They will not look the same to the computer, so it's good to be consistent with our stuff. So that should get us a couple pages that we can check. We'll run that here in a second, and then we'll come back and do the action and method for how we actually send it to the server. Next step, well, like we saw the other day, Django has to know where it's at, so we need to add it to the urls.py file. So those are we're in the templates folder. So I'll go over to URLs, open with Adam again, and let's see, we just need to add a couple things to this list. I'd left a comma in there from when I was getting prepared, so there's probably not a comma if you were copying along. So it is a list, so comma separated, and we'll add a path for tip calc. So my page / tip calc will be the address. My page to get to this app / tip calc we'll have that called views. Whoops, I almost spelled that wrong. Make sure it's views dot tip calc will be a method. And once again, it's good to reuse words. They only look the same to us, so we can reuse them without having to go into camel case and Pascal case and all that. Path tip results. We'll call a method in the views.py script called tip results. That gets it added to the URLs. Add to views.py. So you see, once we get the setup done, the list to do stuff is really, really short. So, yeah, and this is an area I assume everybody's familiar with. So I thought it'd be good to go ahead and throw it so you can see where the error messages in Django show up and how to find them. Next, we'll add it to our views. Remember, this has the methods that the server actually calls. And let's see, whoops. Define tip calc is one of them. And again, it's going to take in a request object. I'll just pass for now, come back and do that in a second. And define tip results, which will take in a request object. And we'll come back and do that in a second. So let's check our page. Return. We're going to render a page. We'll just pass in the request so the computer knows who made the request, where to send it. And this will be tip calc.html. And on our form, well, there wasn't any data we need from the script. So we don't have to pass in a dictionary in this case. And our other one, we'll render the other page, return render request, tip results.html, and we're going to need a dictionary, but we need to put that dictionary together. Put dictionary together. Let's see what we're getting here. To figure out how to do this, we'll just print out the request object so you can see what that looks like. And I left some errors in here, and hopefully didn't make some others while I was talking, but let's check that out now. So we saw a lot of the setup the other day. Should be able to go in here, change directory to where that's at, document/delete. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is this where I started at? Python-m pip in shell. Okay, it didn't have to do a whole bunch of stuff of creating a new virtual environment, so this must be where we started it from the other day. Navigate back into there, document/delete /testing 1, 2, 3, and might as well show this. If I call Python, or if you're on a Mac, Python 3, Python, use manage.py to run our server. Oh, it doesn't know about it here. So if you forget where it's at, you might have to look around for it. Okay, that just has the manifest, so let's check the class folder. Oh, that just has another folder. We'll check in there, list out what's available. Oh, there's our manage.py. So the example, clear all this. So you might have to look around for some of them, but once you find it, then Python, run the manage.py script, and call the run server method from that. Should start it up for us. Got our settings, so we'll come over to a browser and go to 127.0.01, our own machine, connect through port 8000, and then there was a /mypage, and now we should have something called tip calc. Oh, there it is. So we got our form and a price, and it looks like I forgot a submit button. Let me pause the button. Well, I'll just throw it back in here. It'll go quick. Normal little typo things. Let's see, what do we need here? An input type equals submit with lowercase. Value equals submit with uppercase. Then another input type equals reset with lowercase. And value equals reset with uppercase. Save that. And when we reload it, oh, there's our buttons, so we can type some numbers, move our slider based off the service. Oh, there's supposed to be another word there. Get all our typos. Service is somewhere between bad and great. There we go. So we're just using the HTML to put a form together. And then when we click the submit button, something will happen. This will happen. Notice there's a 12.34. Move the slider down here maybe. Hit submit, and notice that in our URL we have those numbers. So I'm gonna, should I pause the video? We're almost done, so I'll just continue this. It should be a short video still. I was hoping for under 15, but it's already past 15. So what we need is we need to send this stuff over to another method when we hit the submit button. So we'll use that to go to our other page. The submit button will just go to our other page, which if you've seen it before, that's what the action method on your form does. So our action, we want to go to our other page. So I'll put slash tip results. I'll just put the name of the page directly. This is one of the errors I wanted to throw. And our method can either be get or post. Essentially the same thing. Get is the default, so we see the numbers in the URL. So for debugging, you want to just keep them in the URL. Eventually, get will be fine for the class, but post you won't see in the URL. The post happens in the background, and get we can see in the URL. So obviously, it's a lot easier to debug things when we can see our numbers. So for class, probably just use get, and then whenever you're working with secure stuff that data needs to be secured and not actually visible in the URL, then you can switch to post. So that should give us something. So if we reload the page, get those latest saves, and remember you can always right click and view the page source, make sure you're looking at the latest version. When we enter some numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, some great service, and hit submit. Okay, so here's an error, but I knew this error was coming. It couldn't find the page, and what it looked is it looked my page / tip calc / tip results. Oh, wait, we were on my page / tip calc, and when our action attribute said tip results, it just threw that on the end. So should be enough information there to figure out what we need to do. We need to go to tip calc / tip results. And then the my page part that defines the whole app is out of the beginning. So if we hit back and reload that to get those changes, I hope I saved them. Oh, tip calc results, it seemed to go a little too far. So that's not where it needed to be. Where else do we have addresses? So this is the one we need to change. So we're on the tip calc page and we're going to the tip results page. That's a really easy mistake to forget to put it here, to try and put it here instead of here. So whatever you put in the form as the action will get appended onto the URL. So make sure you put it there. Let's see, reload that. 1, 2, 1234, some great service, and if we submit it, so here's the next error I wanted to show. Or really, I just wanted to show this page. This is where the errors go. So you see, there's lots and lots of information, lots of things to dig through. There's the variables we got coming on a get. We don't have any posts, didn't send any files, didn't send any cookies. So we can also send those things. For our purposes, the get will probably be enough for most apps. There's our data. It doesn't know what request is. Oh, because we have whatever that word is. It's close to request. So if we come over here to views, oh, there it is. Print request, but we made a little typo there. Save that, and the data is still in our URL, so if we reload it, now we went to the page, we got our error message. So hopefully you can see where this is going. We're getting very close to the end. Let's see. Instead of printing that, which I guess I should show, that printed here. Here's where it printed. These 2 lines were that print statement. And there's what our request looks like, the thing that we see in the URL. I wanted to show that somewhere. So to get those values, always looks like this. So we have that request, and we sent stuff with get. So request.get is what we have, and it's going to come through as a dictionary. So we sent in name attributes for price and service. So from the get of our request, we should have a price and a service equals request.get as a service. And then a tip is going to be the price times service divided by 100. Because I always do range as whole numbers instead of fractions. I've made it work with the decimal values before, but it usually doesn't want to, so it's a lot easier just to do it as whole numbers. So save those. Come over here, still have the data there, reload that. And once again, there's an error. You can see it happened on line 21. Tip equals price times service. There's price, there's service. Does anybody see the problem? I'll give it just a second. Do you see the problem? If you don't see it, here's a hint. That's a string, right? So we're getting a string, which means, well, we can't do math with strings. I think everybody's familiar with that. So let's change these to floating point numbers. And that gives us our tip. So now we should be able to pass that in as a Python dictionary like we saw the other day. Tip is the tip value, which we should probably pass as a string. Format tip to point to F. 2 decimal spots on a floating point number since it's money, because that's how we want to show on the page. So that is our process. So let me check it. There we go. Got our tip. So if we go back, reload this, this is what the final project is. You don't need to make a big, complicated, fancy website. We're making an application. Well, something bigger than a tip calculator, since there's going to be several of you all working through the next 4 or 5 weeks of the semester on it. But if we enter a price for a meal, had some wonderful service, hit submit, and we get a price. I should probably put a $sign on there, but that's good for the example. So you can see it's a lot like that second video the other day. I left the to-do list here to point at the end. So you make your web page with the form and the results, and the form is just the graphical user interface, GUI, or often pronounced GUI, and the action on it is a URL to the page where you want the results to show, and then the URL, or that page, will have the Django template so that it can receive values from a Python dictionary. And add both pages to the URLs one, and remember it's going to continue down a path. So the results page is the page you're on / the results page, something like that. We saw where the errors show up, and then this is where your Python code is going to show up. Most of your stuff's going to happen in the views one or in a module that you do the stuff in another module and then import that. So the project is to make a web application, not a website. The HTML is really just for the form. That's what we want out of it, and maybe a place to throw throw up the results in a sentence. So the input and output are the HTML, but the project is really to make a Python application. Hopefully that cleared up the questions about that. If anybody had that, and this video stretched out for a little while, but you can see how it was. Once the setup's done, it's those things from the second video over and over and over again. And then as your applications get more interesting, it's going to be mostly Python code on simple forms to input and output the results. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see y'all soon.